So hopefully you have joined what you want to join. That is Fact or Fiction, finding fakery-free online information. As you can tell, I like alliteration. So it's kind of hard to say real fast early in the morning, but we'll go with it. You'll notice that on this slide, I have a link to today's slideshow. I urge you to make a note of that, bit.ly. And as you can see, it's got the usual bit.ly address and then newslit21. And the reason I urge you to do that is because there are lots of links in this presentation that, there are quite a few that I probably won't get to today because I've tried to give you a really good library of resources. I do want to say before we continue that my good friend and colleague Kathy Davis was supposed to join us this morning, but she was not able to do that. And so for those of you hoping to see Kathy this morning, I'm afraid she's not with us this morning. So, but anyway, we're going to go on. Hopefully everybody has that bit.ly written down. Again, that's bit.ly/newslit21. And in this next slide, you'll see what I meant about the fact that there's lots of links in here. This is my little, I don't call it a Bitmoji classroom, I call it a Bitmoji reference library because this is really where you can find lots and lots of resources. Over here on the bookcase, you'll see I've placed lots, and I say Kathy Davis helped me create this. Both of us worked together on this and have worked together on it for a couple of years now. This is an area that we really work a lot in. But what you find here are some really top-notch resources for media literacy and news literacy. And I have to say, there are a lot of great resources out there. And sometimes I think a lot of what I do when I'm sharing good media literacy tips and techniques is I'm basically just curating all these great resources that are out there. And hopefully by Kathy and I going through a lot of these, you won't have to do quite so much searching. You'll have some things right there for you. I think everybody knows about Common Sense Media. Some of the ones you may not know, Media Smarts is actually out of Canada. It has some great little videos on both media literacy and digital literacy. They make a slight differentiation between those two. But all of these are good. You're going to see me in just a little bit showing you some things from Project Look Sharp. I had the privilege of just over this weekend, I was in a national conference called NAMLY, it's the National Association of Media Literacy Education. And there were so many great things I wasn't able to even start incorporating them into this session today. But one that I am incorporating is some of the information from Project Look Sharp because they've got some great resources. Something I also want everybody to remember is that media literacy is not just about analyzing media. It's also about students creating media. And so even though I'm not going to deal with that creation aspect today, I wanted to point out that on this screen, I have placed kind of on the right side of the screen, lots of great resources that KET and PBS Learning Media can provide you in the way of creation. I'm just going to go through those very quickly. I'm not going to even go into some of these, but the Media Arts Toolkit, which KET created and is on PBS Learning Media, has wonderful resources. We have within PBS Learning Media, we have a collection called Video Production Behind the Scenes with the Pros, which is where we interviewed a lot of our people in-house to ask them about how they do media production. I'm going to go to another slide here that shows you some new resources that KET has created, or in one case, something that PBS has created. So at the top, we have Lynn Schaefer, is our facilitator here today. She also produced a wonderful resource called It's a Snap, which is all about great photography techniques. And all of these are on, or two of these are on PBS Learning Media. One is on our YouTube channel. So It's a Snap by Lynn is on PBS Learning Media. In the middle here, we have something called Activate, and I am going to go to that since it's not on PBS Learning Media, but our YouTube channel. And our YouTube channel is a great place to go for resources. including all the multimedia PD event recordings as they're recorded. But this Activate series was created by another colleague of mine, Amy Grant, and you'll notice that here she's using PBS learning media resources along with other technologies, things like Canva and stop motion and things like that, and has created these short videos that give you some ideas and information about how to do that. So here are my two colleagues creating these great resources. Trying to get back here, excuse me. Okay, and then last but certainly not least, PBS NewsHour Student Reporting Labs. This is a wonderful resource that has been created by PBS NewsHour. Some of you who have been following the multimedia event and have been in other sessions may have even seen a session done by some of the people from the National PBS NewsHour Reporting Labs on students doing video production. But this website or this part of PBS Learning Media, the PBS NewsHour Student Reporting Labs, is absolutely wonderful. And one of the things I highly recommend, I recommend the whole site, but one of the things I highly recommend are these video tutorials. If you're going to be doing production with your kids, they go into lighting, into why you need B-roll, audio, all different kinds of things. And they do it in such a wonderful, professional, but also fun way. And so please check those out. So again, these are resources for producing media, and I'm not going to be, again, going into how to do that today, but those are all great resources for you. Not to be left out, another great resource is our virtual media lab. Please don't forget about that. And it's now, I think we're working toward having things be in person again. Right now, I think most things are still virtual, but this is a place where you can find out some wonderful resources. A lot of this provided by another great colleague of mine, Cynthia Warner, who a lot of you know, and you can see some of the sessions that she offers in all different kinds of not just video production, but media production of all different kinds. And so please don't forget about our media lab. It's a great resource. So those are all kind of production resources that I wanted you to know about. But now we're going to jump into the media literacy, the other aspects of media literacy. And so I'm going to continue forward a little bit here. So here is a question for you, or actually two questions, and I'd like to see some answers in the chat. So, you've entered the confessional, and your first question is, have you ever shared something on social media that you later found out wasn't true? Reply yes or no in the chat, and I will tell you to make you feel better that I know I have on more than one occasion. The next question is, if you have shared something untrue, how did you find out it was false after you shared it? So we have a lot of people that are smarter than I am that say no, they have never shared anything that that they found out was false. And some say very honestly, not that I know of. So I'm getting some good examples here. Great, some great answers here. Yeah, and I see some found out after you did it just by doing further research. Some of you are staying out of social media. Some are terrified of social media. So that's, I do social media of some kinds, and I probably do too much of it, but I really love your honest answers. And, I think we're going to get into some of the reasons why we share media, either socially or just as we're creating media. But we're going to talk a little bit more about why we at some point may have shared something that was wrong. And don't beat yourself up about it if you have. The main thing is that there are ways we can prevent it. Okay, great. Good information from all of you. Thank you for doing that. Okay, let's go on. Oh, and before we go on, I do want to point out, this isn't just an empty picture here. This cute picture of the frog riding the tortoise is actually The reason I put this in here is this is an article that talks about wildlife photography and a lot of memes that we see with cute things of animals. This gives you some background. And what's really interesting about this picture is that PBS NewsHour actually posted this and as true because they had looked at Getty Images, which it was in their stuff that wasn't considered editorial, so they thought it was real, and then they had to go back and do a detraction on it. So, so even the professionals sometimes share things that they later find out are not real. The important thing about real professionals in journalism, and this is one of the things we need to know about media literacy, is the real journalists and will go back and will admit their mistakes and they will put in detractions of what they've done. So that's one of the things that we have to take into account as we're looking at sites that claim to be journalism sites. Okay, so just what is media literacy? This is a video from Crash Course, which a lot of you might be familiar with. I'm very quickly going to let this gentleman tell us a little bit about what media literacy is, because he does a very good job of very quickly going through the main points of what media literacy is.
It describes media literacy as the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act using all forms of communication. Now, with this definition in mind, think back to the media you spent your time with today. What kind of content were you absorbing, and how did you get to it? Were you making sense of its messages? Were you aware that each message was created by someone with their own goals and opinions? When you create media, like a blog post or an Instagram, what is your responsibility to those who view it? Finally, what do you do with all that info you just received? With media literacy skills, you'll have the power to think through each of these important questions every time you pick up your phone or flip on the radio. It'll be like putting on a pair of glasses for the first time, so eye-opening you'll never want to take them off, which is great because you won't actually be able to take them off. It'll be hard to look at media the same way. So actually, I guess media literacy is more like laser eye surgery.
And I like his analogy to laser eye surgery. I've been doing media literacy for a long time because I've been at KT for a long time. And it's changed a lot over the years. Used to, it was always things like analyzing commercials and things that you saw on TV, things like that, before the internet became such a big deal and social media became such a big deal. And one of the things that even way back then, so many people told me during these sessions was that I've never been able to look at media the same way again. And that has nothing to do with me being a good trainer. It has everything to do with the fact that once you learn these techniques and start really examining media, then it's hard to unlook. It's hard to go back and say, oh, I can just avoid all these niceties about whether something's true or not. Once you've really started looking at how to discern when sites are reliable or not, and that type of issue, then it's hard to go back, which is a good thing, of course. So just to kind of review what he said, it's media literacy is that ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act. And so these are all very important things. And as I said, we're not going to get into the creating part. But we are going to look at some of this analyzing and evaluating today. That's the main thing we're going to look at. Now, news literacy is a subset of media literacy, and it is that ability to use those critical thinking skills that are listed in media literacy, but to judge the reliability and credibility of news reports, but not just news reports, basically any kind of factual information that you're wanting your students to be able to research from, or to be able to just react to and act on in their normal everyday lives. And so it's very important for them to know, whether they're doing a research paper for school, or again, just doing something where they're acting on something in their private lives, that they know whether something's coming from a reliable resource. A couple of things media literacy is not, and one of those is it's not just looking at things from one perspective. We should examine the media from multiple positions. And it means not it doesn't mean just avoid it. It's everybody's choice what they watch, what they look at on the internet, what they participate in. But don't feel like we just have to tell students, just don't do it, because we know they're going to. It's so much a part of their lives. But what we want them to do is to consume it carefully and think critically about it, and also think critically when they're producing their own media. So something I'm very pleased and proud about is that KET has produced, we have actually a whole new collection of resources called Social Studies Shorts. And these are on all different kinds of topics around the area of social studies and civics and those kind of things. But we have produced one on media and news literacy. I did want to show you a little bit of that one. I'm not going to show the whole thing because of time, but I just wanted you to see kind of what we've got going on here as far as resources that you can use with your students. And this should work for upper elementary and middle school students. It's done by the same people as far as production that do News Quiz, so you know it's quality. So let's look at a little bit of this particular resource. And so here you see the whole Social Studies Shorts collection, but I'm going to click on News Literacy.
Hi, and welcome to Social Studies Shorts, where we explore a little more about our state, our country, and the world. To understand the world around us, we need reliable information. But have you ever seen or shared information you later found out wasn't true? Due to the internet and the 24-hour news cycle, we constantly swim in a sea of information that is not always reliable. There are ways to stay afloat, but first you need a media literacy life vest. The term fake news is often used to describe false information in the media. Experts don't like that term because often people use it to refer to information they don't agree with, whether it's true or not. Instead of fake news, use the terms misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation is inaccurate information that's been shared by mistake. The person sharing it wasn't trying to mislead people. Disinformation is untrue information that a person shares on purpose to mislead their audience. To spot mis- and disinformation, it helps to ask these questions. 1. Who created this message? 2. Why was the message made? What's its purpose? Who's its audience? The purpose can be to persuade, inform, or engage, or entertain. Audience is who the message is targeting. 3. Who is paying for the message? What else have they paid for? Do they have other agendas? 4. What techniques are being used to get people's attention? 5. Who's represented in the message? What points of view are being left out? With these questions in mind, here are 4 ways to help determine if information is reliable.
Okay, so I'm going to stop that there because I'm actually going to get into these 4 ways that they will be talking about in this news literacy social studies short. But I wanted you to hear what Kelsey read there about not calling things fake news, but instead using the terms misinformation and disinformation, because that's a much more honest way of looking at a lot of the things that we see online. So please use the Social Studies Shorts resources. I think you'll find them all great. Our graphics people at KET did a wonderful job of making this very watchable and very fun for kids to watch. So try it out. But this one I think is a great resource. And those 5 questions to ask about media, they're here. Who created the message? Why was the message made? And this is where you get into the purpose and also who's the intended audience. And we know that's so important to turn that back into when we're teaching writing with students, when we're teaching basic literacy with students. We know that we teach them that purpose and audience is very important. And we do the same thing in media. We always have to think about purpose and audience. Who paid for the message? Very, very important. How is the message trying to get your attention? As far as kind of what kind of techniques are they using? And then who's represented in the message? And just as importantly, who's missing? I mentioned that I attended the Namely conference virtually this weekend. And really the whole thrust of that conference was all about social justice issues and how the media works within the arena of social justice. And so a lot of that conference was talking about who's being left out of the narrative when it comes to media. You'll notice this is going to be repeating through a number of different formats, but there are some techniques that we're going to be looking at. And one of them is just to stop. We're going to talk about something called click restraint in just a minute. Investigating the source is a part of what we call lateral reading, where you're going to go out from the site that you're on or the site that you clicked on and click on other sites to find other sources. We'll talk more about that in a bit. And that also goes into trace, which is going back to the original, because often media has been changed, it's been doctored, it's been taken out of context as far as when and where it happened. And then finding trusted coverage. We'll talk more about that in just a moment as far as what that means. Now, I've got two different little reminders here. The SIFT one is a really important one, but I wanted to put this one up here too, as far as how to spot disinformation. This is actually put out by the International Federation of Library Associations for all of you library media specialists out there. But notice a couple of things here that we didn't mention before. One is it a joke? So we need to point out to kids that sometimes things are parody. Sometimes they're satirical, and they need to know that, because then sometimes those things get posted as truth when actually they were never, somebody posts something from the Onion and it was never meant to be the actual truth, but it gets changed and posted that way. And then the other one, which we're going to get more into in just a moment, is check your biases. And this is very important to think about as well, that we all have biases. Not going to spend a long time on this, but one of the things that we get asked when it comes to media literacy is, how do I incorporate this across the curriculum? How do I introduce this? Everybody says, oh, I don't have time to do media literacy as a separate thing. Well, the point is hopefully not to do it as a separate thing, but to integrate it. Now, I know we hear this about every new thing that comes down the pike. We can integrate it across the curriculum. Well, it really is true when it comes to news literacy, and especially in the social studies arena. It's an area that you can really promote news literacy and media literacy. And of course, English language arts is another natural for that, but it can be promoted in math and science and all the other areas. But I wanted to point out that this is a great way to get in to news literacy and fake news or misinformation and disinformation, and that is through a study of propaganda. And I'm not going to go into these resources really, other than to show you these are some great references just to look at. And Lynn, I see that you want to know, somebody want to know if they could print something as a poster, and that is just fine.
I think they meant the graphic that you had previously.
Yeah, was that
the disinformation, or the how to spot
disinformation?
Yeah.
Oh, the SIFT. Okay, yeah.
I think that one.
I believe they could,
yes.
I'm going to show you all a resource in just a little bit that has this as a link within it, and you can go to a better quality version of it. And I don't think they would have any problems at all with you printing that out.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes,
thank you, Larry.
Yeah, it is a great resource. But getting back into these areas of propaganda, there are lots of great resources. There's Mission US is a wonderful resource. These are actual video simulations, or like video games about different periods of American history. And there's one of them which is called For Crown or Colony, about the Revolutionary War. And there's a really nice lesson called Mr. Revere's Engraving, which deals with the idea of propaganda. The thing is, a lot of kids think that, the ideas of fake news, misinformation, disinformation, that these are things that came along with social media. They don't realize how old these techniques are. The museum has a wonderful resource called Disinformation Nation. And this site has all kinds of wonderful videos and resources. And then on a kind of somber note, Echoes and Reflections is a very comprehensive resource about the Holocaust. And they have a portion of their site and their resources that deals with propaganda used in Nazi Germany. And actually the picture that you see here is from a book that was taught in elementary school in Nazi Germany called The Poisonous Mushrooms. And it was referring to the Jewish people as these poisonous mushrooms who had popped up in society. And so that shows how evil and terrible this was and how evil and terrible propaganda can be. But we have to keep in mind that propaganda can also be positive. Basically, every public service announcement that tells people not to smoke or to put on their seatbelt or whatever, those are all a form of propaganda. Propaganda is mainly persuading people, using media to persuade people to do something and using certain techniques to do it. But when we think about propaganda, we usually think about bad things, and that is oftentimes the case. And I wanted to let you know that if you go into PBS Learning Media, there are some wonderful resources on propaganda. I love the one on the left-hand side of the screen here. The Birth of a Nation, of course, was a wonderful piece of cinema. If you think of it from just looking at the techniques that were used, it was pioneering in that way, but it was also basically a piece of lost cause propaganda, which glorified the KKK. In fact, the original name of the Birth of a Nation was The Klansman. So anyway, there's a lot of information on PBS Learning Media about Birth of a Nation. In the middle there, we have information about yellow journalism and about Hearst and Pulitzer and about the Spanish-American War and all those kinds of things. And then on the right, the power of propaganda in World War II. And we're seeing both propaganda that America used and that the Axis powers used, as well as all the other Allied powers. So that is a interactive lesson, and it's actually very good. So another thing we get asked a lot is, what grade level should I be teaching this at? And most people think middle school and high school is where we should be teaching this. But news literacy and this idea of looking at things and looking at if they're reliable data or not can be taught at a much younger age. And as I mentioned earlier, I was going to share some things from Project Look Sharp, which is a project out of Ithaca College. And they use what they call constructivist decoding. And I just like this little quote here. It says, it assumes that each student constructs their own meaning. So we're not telling students what to think about these resources that they see, but they're constructing their own meaning from the interaction between what the media is and their own unique identity. And it is the role of the teacher to ask questions that will result in the richest discussions and deepest learning. This ties in very much with our idea of asking essential questions or compelling questions, and then those supporting questions that students need to ask themselves. And so we're actually going to look at, in this next slide, a little bit of this teacher, fourth grade teacher, teaching her students a little bit about decoding. And at the beginning, she talks about just how to teach kids in an asynchronous way, virtually, because this was in the middle of COVID when it first started, and she was teaching this way. But we're going to go past that and get into seeing how she works with students on this. You'll also notice on the right side of the screen, I've put all the support materials that go with this lesson that she's teaching, because Project Look Sharp has created some really nice lesson plans that go with that. So we're going to go to this, and I'm going to...
Hi, I'm Angela Levy.
I'm going to advance a little
Using
bit.
this blended approach. My students will be analyzing YouTube recommendations that came up when searching the phrase, "Is the Earth flat?" This is from the Project Look Sharp lesson, YouTube recommendations. What do I do? So what we're going to look at today together is we're going to look at a YouTube results page. All right. So that's what happens when you go to YouTube and search. And this is an example of a search that somebody did. So when I do that, I'm going to type a question that somebody typed in. And the question was, is the earth flat? Okay. So before I even show you the results page, like, what is your first reaction to my asking the question, is the earth flat?
The answer is no. Why would you ask that question?
Okay. JP, what's your reaction?
I already know it's a no, but I've actually seen a YouTuber see if the earth was flat. Even though we all know it's not, so.
So taking a look at those, I want to know, what do you think the creators of this YouTube video description want me to do? Any of these descriptions. So remember, people made these. They typed out the description.
The earth is flat.
So, yeah, so let's think about this. What do you think their goal is? The YouTube creators, the creators of these videos that made these descriptions, what do you think they want you to do? Lena.
Leave a like and subscribe.
Sorry, what was that, Elena?
Click it and watch it and favorite and like it and subscribe.
You're saying click it, like it, subscribe it. I heard Grace say like it and subscribe. Does anybody else have an idea about what you think they want you to do?
They want you to watch the video.
Yeah. What makes you think that, JP? Why do you think they want you to watch the video?
Because they want you to think something that might not be true.
So, like, in other words, are you saying that they're trying to convince you of a thing?
Yes.
And why do you think they would want to do that? What would be the purpose? Like, remember, we're talking a lot about purpose and audience when we're talking about opinion writing. What would be the purpose of convincing you of something that's not true or getting you to watch one of these videos? What are you thinking is why they would do that? All right, so here is what we're going to do now, because I want you to have the opportunity to really think about these questions. So I'm just going to show you here that in this CISA activity, which I have linked for you, I've asked you a few questions, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to look really closely at this document and get some evidence about what you're thinking, right? So a couple of the questions are things that I just asked you. So I'm just repeating the questions we just discussed together. And then the final question that I'd like you to think about while you're working on your own, and then we'll come back together and talk, is, are these YouTube recommendation descriptions effective in getting kids to click on them?
Okay, so I wasn't going to show you the whole thing, although I would actually like to. She does a wonderful job with these students, and she does a wonderful job of bringing out from them what she wants to make sure that they understand about looking at, in this case, YouTube, and looking at resources in YouTube to see if they are reliable or not. Notice that throughout that video that she is, looks like it's going to try and play some more here. Notice that throughout that video, you'll see at the bottom of the screen that they have placed things like ask probing questions, ask for evidence, all those kinds of little things that can help a teacher, because this video was created to help teachers understand how they can use this constructivist decoding with students. And if you go to the Project Look Sharp site, you will find many of these videos that were created to show teachers how to do different aspects of media literacy. But notice that one of the things I wanted to make sure that you noticed was that she wasn't telling the students how to think about this. She asked them. A lot of this was very Socratic. She was asking them questions and getting them to tell her what they thought. I love how they reacted when they heard what the topic was, and how the one boy says, no, the earth is not flat, and why would you ask that? But I think this whole video is very, very instructive. Okay, sorry, I was checking the chat to make sure we're still okay. So we're going to move on, but please check out Project Look Sharp and check out some of these videos. And this one, if you watch it to the end, is incredibly good. And the support materials are also incredibly good. So if you look at those support materials, you can do pretty much exactly what she did. It kind of gives you a step-by-step process. So I did mention that we're asking students to come up with what they think about something, and we as adults, of course, need to do that too. But we need to do that keeping in mind that we all have biases, and there are several different types of things that can affect bias. One is that idea of confirmation bias, which is this idea that we tend to like things that already agree with what we believe in. And I think we all understand and have heard about confirmation bias. Two others are filter bubbles and echo chambers. And the only one I'm going to get into a little bit here, because some people are unfamiliar with the term filter bubble, is that a filter bubble is basically how we become insulated within social media many times because the algorithms that are set up in different platforms, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever these social media constructs are, that they can set up their algorithms where they are showing you only the things that they know that you like, or things that they know they'll want you to click on and keep watching, because the thing is they want you to keep watching, they want you to keep clicking. That is their main goal, so they can sell advertising, so they can persuade you to buy things. So it's the same goal that we had back even before the internet. But there is a great video here that talks about filter bubbles. And again, I'm not going to show that, but if you click here where it says filter bubble, it'll explain a little bit more. Sorry, that's at the bottom. There's a video that will tell you very quickly a little bit more about it. But I want to go on and get into our techniques. So I'm not wanting us to get away from that, because I know we're getting short on time. One of the things that was talked about in SIFT and in some other ways is to look for trusted sources. And one of those things that is actually mentioned in the News Literacy Social Studies shorts that if you watch that whole thing, you'll see it, is we talk about librarians or teachers being a trusted source. And so we want students to come to you, and because we know that you have these skills. And so we want them to see you as a trusted resource. And then the other thing they can do is they can look at various fact-checking sites as sources. And so we've listed some of the fact-checking sites. I've tried to list ones that I thought would be most helpful. There is always the issue that because of confirmation bias and these biases that we all have, some people are going to say, oh, these fact-checking sites are left-leaning or right-leaning, or they don't do this enough, or they don't do that enough. But check them out, see what you think. I think most of these are really good sites at fact checking. So let's get into these other things. The first one is click restraint. We already heard that it's important. Thank you, Shannon, for sharing that. I always like when people are able to share other resources. Now, then I'll need to check this out. Oh, I think I've actually seen that one, and that is a very good resource. But we're going to get into some of these techniques, and this first one's called click restraint. I am going to show a little bit of this one.
Most students think the top result of a web search is the most trustworthy. They often click on the first search result and hardly ever go beyond the first page. This is a problem because search results can be manipulated by the use of clever search terms and metadata. Companies engage in search engine optimization to push some entries to the top and move others to the bottom. Ads can appear at the top of search results, forcing other results down too. Sometimes, this can place less trustworthy information sources above more reliable ones. Our research with professional fact-checkers showed that they have a different approach to evaluating search results than students. Instead of immediately clicking on the first or second result, fact-checkers practice click restraint. Before clicking on any result, they first examine the titles, the URLs, and the snippets, the brief information under each result, for clues. They look for trusted sources. By engaging in click restraint, they first get a sense of the information neighborhood in which they've landed before clicking on any result. Students, by hastily clicking on the first search result, can end up on a problematic site that leads them to even more problematic sites. The result? Shaky conclusions based on dubious information.
Okay, so again, I'm not going to show you all that because of time, But that last thing that they talked about as far as kids clicking on the first thing they see and it being dubious, I know that some of you may have heard the story if you've been in other media literacy trainings I've done. I was asked when I worked for the Louisville Water Company as an educator, I was asked to kind of judge these science presentations that were done in a high school, believe it or not, high school class about water quality. And I found that about at least half of these presentations that were presented were done based on students clicking on sites that were for water filtration companies. And so, of course, you know, they were talking about how terrible all the water was and how only their things could clean it up and kind of inventing problems there. And so, you know, you do have to be careful and use that click restraint. Look at things like that snippet. Look at where it comes from, who the author is. Those are all things you can judge even before you click on the actual site. So, so anyway, that's a little bit about click restraint. That's one technique to use and to teach kids. Another one is lateral reading. And lateral reading is something that I think a lot of us understand, and probably most of us already do. But it basically, and I'm going to show you a little bit of this one very quick, is basically talking about opening up other sites and looking around, which they even talk a little bit about in the click restraint one as well.
We live in an era of information overabundance. This demands that we be more discerning. Instead of accepting information at face value, we should always ask this one important question: who's behind the information? The Stanford History Education Group conducted a study with Stanford undergraduates, professors from 4 different universities, and professional fact checkers to determine the most effective methods for evaluating digital information. There were dramatic differences in how intelligent people looked at the web. Many smart undergrads and esteemed professors evaluated a site by reading vertically, staying on the site and reading it as if it were a printed document. They focused on the site's look, its aesthetics, graphics, and overall appearance. They were deceived by an official-looking logo or the name of the organization. They attributed importance to the .org in the URL without realizing that .org is an open domain. Any individual or group can buy a .org domain without passing a character test or proving they're working for social betterment. They examined scholarly references and research reports without realizing that, unlike an academic journal, on the web, anything goes. Intelligent people equipped with critical thinking skills were often taken in by slick web pages. Professional fact-checkers approach the web differently. They understood that on the web, what you see is often not what you get. The web is treacherous territory, and you can't let your eyes deceive you. Landing on an unfamiliar site, they didn't waste precious time engaged in close reading. Instead, they opened new tabs in their browser and read laterally. Rather than spending time on a site like the Employment Policy Institute, they turned to the broader web. They clicked on a New York Times article about the Employment Policy Institute entitled "Fight Over Minimum Wage Illustrates Web of Industry Ties." They scanned the Wikipedia entry, which describes the Institute as a fiscally conservative think tank particularly aimed towards reducing the minimum wage.
So, and that's again all I'm going to show you of that one. There's a lot more good information in that particular resource. But again, it's a very simple technique, and it's basically, instead of just reading that one resource, we go out, we open other tabs, we look at who is the author, we look at what money is going into the site, we look at you know, what's the sources that they're using. There are all different kinds of questions that we can ask. We can look at how dated the information is, all kinds of things that we need to look at that way. Okay, and then last but not least, this idea of something called a reverse image search. And this has become much easier. It used to be a little bit harder to do a reverse image search, But now, in many cases, simply by right-clicking on an image, if you're on a machine that right-clicks, or just clicking on an image, it will bring up the ability to do a reverse image search, which is basically looking at where a picture is found in other places on the web, where an image is found. And some of it is just using our common sense. For instance, I happened to look at this, one of the little frog with frost on it, and it was touted as being one of these frogs that can be frozen and then thawed out and they will come back to life. And that is actually very true. That actually happens. And I'm using one of my fact checker sites here. This is Snopes. And it says, can these frogs survive after freezing in winter? The answer is yes, but the picture is not one of those frogs, because if you look at it closely, a real frog, and if you look at the frog on the upper left-hand side, this is the science teacher in me, notice that his eyes are kind of on the side of his head because he is a prey animal. And so he needs eyes that can look around and see everything behind him and all that's going on. Notice that this frog has forward-facing eyes, which is more like a predator. That's because this is a little figurine. It's a little garden figurine that had frost on it. It was a picture was taken as a, of this is just a quick, cute thing. And then it got subverted and made into, this is about real frogs. And so, I'm running out of time here, I know, but check out these other things on my presentation, this thing about engagement baiting and about clickbait. These are both very important. And if you click on here where it says click here, no really, this will take you to a wonderful site. I'm going to end with this. That's actually from the NPC library, National Park College Library. They have lots of great information on clickbait, on detecting fake news. And this tip sheet is what somebody asked about earlier as far as your poster that somebody wanted to print out. And so there's that information for you. I'm sorry that I've kind of run out of time. Are there any questions before we get out of here?
Larry, I will say one thing. I'm sorry to interrupt, but one person has had trouble with the link to the evaluation, and I have clicked on it. It works for me.
Okay.
So I have taken that person's name, and it's Tracy, just to let you know. I'll make sure that gets to you, and we'll get you set up. Has anybody else tried the evaluation link? And to let me know if it works for you. It worked for Christy. Okay.
I did.
Okay.
Good. Looks like for the majority of people it's working. That's great.
I don't know if it would be a pop-up blocker or some other thing that I have no idea about, but I've got your name down, Tracy, and we will figure that out.
Yeah, we'll make sure you get your credit.
Yeah.
We're not going to leave you hanging there.
If you could just go ahead and message me your email, and that'll save me a step of tracking it down. And I'll write that down too. Yes, thank you, Larry. I thought you lots of great info that I was glad to get as well, a refresher.
Well, as usual, I never get through all the information, but that's one of the wonderful things about this is that we didn't even get into deep fakes here, but one of the wonderful things here is that you can always go back to these resources on this presentation that I've created, and Kathy and I have created, I should say. There are tons of great resources here. The thing is just kind of going through them and see what you like and what works for you. So thank you everybody for being such good participants. I love seeing things in the chat, and please just go out there and teach those kids about how to be good consumers and creators and analyzers of media, because we're certainly inundated with it. And please check out that media literacy social studies shorts video. It really goes through a lot of the same things that I did today. So a lot of those same techniques. And I hope you like my Bitmoji at the end. I had to, when I saw it, I had to take off on it since we had the turtle with the frog on its back earlier. So I hope y'all have a great one.